the Orioles spending real money at free agency as Pete Alonso, the polar bear, he's coming to town, pending physical. Joining us now to talk about that and the other work that still needs to be done by Mike Elias if the Orioles want to get back into that playoff mix after a debacle of a 2025 season. He's on the Window Nation guest hotline from the Baltimore Sun. Welcome back to the show, Matt Weyrich. Matt, how you feeling?
Doing well, fellas. How we doing?
Doing all right. And Matt, you know, you've been there when Mike Elias has been saying all these things and David Rubenstein saying all these things about spending money and having the wherewithal financially to make a move like this one. They finally did it. That being said, was there any level of skepticism or surprise? Skepticism that they would do it, and were you surprised that they actually did spend significant money, biggest contract they've ever signed to a guy outside of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, certainly they've come out hot this offseason. They make the move for Kittredge first week. They go and they sign Ryan Helsley. They trade for Taylor Ward. So, you know, they've been taking an aggressive approach all offseason. The question was, could they close a deal for somebody at the top end of free agency? And maybe the initial thought was that they would be doing it in the rotation, but clearly they're taking the struggles that they had offensively to heart. The Orioles last season, first baseman ranked dead last in MLB with 14 home runs. They just signed the guy who hit the most home runs at the position in Pete Alonso. So it addresses a key need, might create a bit of a logjam at first base. That'll have to be decided, but certainly it is a splashy move and maybe the defining move of the Mike Elias era so far.
Now, as we look at the potential lineup based on the players that are on the roster right now, Matt, and the Orioles were 11th in homers last year, but 2 years ago they were one of the best teams in baseball and mashing the long ball. And, you know, they were great with runners in scoring position 2 years ago in 23 when they won the division. Alonso brings the pop, hit over 300 with runners in scoring position. So where does he fit into the lineup? Yeah, Ward hit 32 last year. Orioles had a team, let me remind our listeners, nobody hit 20 home runs last year. How does this line up? What's the offensive potential for it based on the personnel right now?
Yeah, if you can get a couple of bounce-back seasons from guys like Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman, Jordan Westberg maybe staying healthy, this looks like one of the most dangerous units in the entire American League. You know, with Taylor Ward's addition, maybe Tyler O'Neill stays healthy. You could see this running 6, 7, 8 guys deep if guys start to live up to their potentials. Now, that was the problem last year, was that they were really gambling on the Orioles living up to their potential, the young guys, and many of them regressed. However, you know, with these additions now with Taylor Ward and Pete Alonso, I think there's a lot of different ways you could put this lineup together. Maybe it looks a little bit different against lefties versus righties, but I think there's a lot of candidates for that number one spot, and that's really where I think it'll kind of decide the rest, is who they want to lead off with. If you go with Gunnar Henderson, you know, you've got a lot of right-handed sluggers all of a sudden, and that might create a pocket that you kind of have to break up with a lefty or a switch hitter like Rutschman. But maybe you go with a right-hander at leadoff. Maybe that's Taylor Ward, who did lead off a lot for the Angels over the years and certainly could be the candidate to do that against lefties. So I think it's going to depend on how Craig Albernaz wants to slot in the leadoff spot and really protect Gunnar Henderson from having to face too many lefties like he did last year.
Now, Matt, we look at, you mentioned the logjam at first base. You have Mountie, who they offered a deal to. He could make upwards of $8 million in arbitration. Kobe Mayo used to be untouchable. I'm guessing that tag is no longer there. They've already extended Basayo, who I guess will platoon, Weeders. I keep Freudian slipping Weeders. It's Rutschman's going to be the starter, and then Basayo will be the backup, get his sacks at first and left-handed DH. So who goes? Is it going to be Mayo? Going to be Mountie? Packaged with whom as they look for another starting pitcher here, I would assume, to bolster the rotation. And does that even preclude them from signing a free agent in regards to big-ticket money spending here, too?
Yeah, I definitely could still see them shopping at the front of the market for starting pitching. It does sound like they are still in the conversations for guys like Ranger Suarez and Framber Valdez. So I wouldn't rule them out for really anybody at this point, especially now that they've demonstrated they can and will spend like a true contender. So, you know, with that said, if they make a trade, maybe Kobe Mayo gets thrown in for a starting pitcher. Maybe they flip Ryan Mountcastle to a first base needy team. You know, Boston was rumored to be among the finalists for Alonso. They need first base help. Maybe Mountcastle could be an answer there, rare in-division trade. But certainly, I think it's really going to depend on what they do in the rotation first. And then, if the logjam still isn't cleared by then, worst comes to worst, they could cut bait with Ryan Mountcastle and only be owing a prorated version of his salary if they were to cut bait with him by opening day. It's a weird loophole that's in the CBA over arbitration players. So Mountcastle, while still under contract for now, they do have a potential out, if they aren't able to get any kind of semblance of value for him or for Mayo.
Matt Weyrich, Baltimore Sun, joining us here. Vinny and Haney, 105.7 The Fan. And you mentioned Kittredge, and the Orioles brought him back. They signed Helsley to be the back end, as Albernaz said at the winter meetings a couple of days ago. He will be the closer. What work still needs to be done in the bullpen before we're comfortable with them, at least on paper, headed to Sarasota?
Yeah, I think they still need one more left-handed reliever, and that's a bit of a tough market right now. Gregory Soto, who had a 4+ ERA for the Orioles and Mets last season, just signed with the Pirates for north of $7 million. That's just kind of the going rate right now, considering the lack of left-handed options available. Keegan Aiken is the Orioles' best option in-house currently for that role, and he has done some late leverage inning type things before, but he really isn't a lefty specialist, which is kind of the one thing that this bullpen is missing. But Mike Elias did say that he does want to leave open a spot or two for guys to compete in spring training. Guys like Cade Stroud, Rico Garcia, Dietrich Enns, those types who really impressed down the stretch. Maybe they are the solutions there. But also it probably depends on the rotation. If they go out and get one starter, okay, you can move Cade Povich to AAA, but you go out and get two, all of a sudden is Tyler Wells factoring into the bullpen mix, Dean Kramer. If you really go and get somebody who can give you a lot of innings, you don't necessarily need that from Kramer. Does he become a long man? So I think there's still work to be done, and it really just starts with the rotation, and the ripple effects I think will be felt across the roster.
Hey, Matt, what is Alonso going to bring to the clubhouse off the field?
Yeah, I think that being a proven winner, a guy who's done it in the postseason, he has more home runs in the playoffs than the Orioles do as a whole team since 2017. So, he has that kind of pedigree, somebody who, has played in a big market, seen a lot of big name players and a lot of leaders come through that clubhouse over the years. That experience is something that I just think is intangible and is really something that this clubhouse was lacking. Tyler O'Neill actually had the most service time of any player under contract heading into the winter meetings, just with 7 years of playing time. So, for Alonso to come in now and really be that veteran presence already in his 30s, who's been there, done that, and knows what it takes to win, I think he's going to be a North Star for this clubhouse to follow in a lot of ways.
Matt Weyrich, Baltimore Sun, talking about the Orioles. Winter meetings are done, but the Orioles have made a splash for sure, and other moves we expect of the big-time variety would be happening, hopefully, before we get to Sarasota Spring Training 2026. Matt, if we don't talk to you, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and the family, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Appreciate it, guys. You too.
Thanks,
there you go, Matt Weyrich, everybody. We'll come